Hello there, students. Class is in session. I'm your professor, Colin C. Megachenheimer, and today we're going to be looking at the concept of group dynamics and how it relates to League of Legends, the video game. So, let's start off by defining what group dynamics is, in case you don't exactly know. What group dynamics is, it's a concept within philosophy, or rather, it's a field of study in philosophy that focuses on groups. It focuses on how groups are formed, how individuals interact with members of the group, how individual behavior is changed by the structure of a group. It focuses on, like, basically people working together as a unit, as well as two different units of people, working with or against one another. It's a very wide field in terms of what it actually focuses on. But the underlying premise of it is this: the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The group is always going to be able of achieving more in terms of just like output, in terms of capabilities, than the individual will, and that what you get when you put these different individuals together, you're going to get something more than just what those individuals bring into it. So let's actually look at an actual field of study, or rather a psychologist's work within group dynamics, and then we'll begin to relate to League of Legends. So in the 1960s, there was a man named Bruce Tuckman, and he focused on how groups actually formed. So he published a work in 1965 called Tuckerman's Stages of Group Development. So this was looking at how a group formed, and he was able to break it down into 4 distinct stages. You had the forming, storming, norming, and performing. He would later go on to add a 5th stage about a decade later called adjournment or mourning stage. M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. Not mourning as in the morning, but mourning as in I've lost something and I'm crying. So if you look at the 4 stages, forming is when the group is initially formed, when it's put together, when you introduce these people and say, all right, you are all into a group, and this is where members of the group kind of begin to be like, oh, hi, pleasure to meet you. It's the really formal introductory stage. Then you get storming. This is where you kind of begin to let the politeness barrier break down. You're letting your own opinions form through, your own personality quirks coming on through, and then this is where people begin to adapt into it. And in this stage, it's a very critical one, because if there's too much storming, if there's too much chaos and there's not enough agreement within the group, you can actually have the group fundamentally fall apart in this stage, because it will never be able to begin to adapt to itself and begin to function, which is the 3rd stage, norming. That's basically what I just said. Members of the group adapt to what happens in the storming stages. You're getting used to that, and then you begin to build trust. You suddenly begin to identify yourself as a group, and you say, okay, we are the group, I like these people, or I can work with these people, and you go from there. Then performing is exactly what it sounds. It's when the group is actually working towards their objective and their task. And then the mourning stage is when the group disbands, and then individuals in the group reflect on the experience. So it's pretty obvious how you relate this one to League, because it's basically a game of solo queue. If you look at the forming stages, forming begins immediately once you get all the random players in their own little lobbies together. And then, people will introduce themselves, usually by calling out their role, rather than saying, hi, my name is, this is my background. Those little dorky little assignments that teachers do at the beginning of every class that you go through every semester. That's really annoying. But it actually serves a very good purpose, so then you begin to normalize with the class. You begin to kind of figure out who is who, and then you can begin to building up the subgroups in the class. In League of Legends, it's people going top, mid, or prefer AD, or support, or there's always that one guy who occasionally comes up middle feed. So you can kind of get the forming stage going on there. Storming is then when people begin to kind of express what they really want. Perhaps they have this sense of humor about them, or they introduce this idea of, I'm going to jungle. Oh, I'm trying to think of a really funny jungler. Jungle Twitch, this is what I'm going to pick for the game. And you're just like, oh, what? And then this is where people kind of begin to show off what champions they want to play, what picks they consider to be in their champion pool, and what they want to use within that. And then, to give an example of how in the storming phase, it can fall apart. Somebody quits the game, and they're just like, you know what, I'm not going to play with that. I'm not dealing with Shen support, or I'm not dealing with this all AD composition, or this one guy's just, I know he's going to be a troll with how he's been talking, screw this. Or perhaps that, you don't begin to build that trust to each other, and you go into the game, but then you're really wary of what they are. So that's the storming phase. Norming phase is basically the laning phase. It's kind of when you begin to kind of feel like, okay, how do people play in game? Does this guy know how to ADC? Does my mid laner roam? Does he just sit in lane and farm all game? This is where you begin to adapt to one another, begin to understand people's playstyle, as well as like how you can set up ganks and how you communicate about things. If you die in a kill, does your support go, what the fuck, OMG, so bad? Or do they say, okay, I totally missed my flay there, did you use heal? No, okay, that's what I thought. Alright, so what we gotta do now, is he being constructive? It's kind of those things. And then performing is basically once you get through those first few minutes of laning phase, you adapt to each other, and then it's time for like the team fight, it's time for the objective control, and then it's time for the group to work towards winning the game. So that's like how like a cute way of like Bruce Tuckman's studies relate to League of Legends. But what about like the overall what are some key concepts, okay, that group dynamics has as a whole, which we can apply to League of Legends? So you can look at several different studies, and you can basically find like anything that applies to League of Legends. I'm going to try and pull out two key things here that I personally feel like would be the most impactful in terms of us as the players applying them to our games in order to give us a better chance of success. So we're looking for things that we can use to improve our own play, or at least our own team play, because it's more focusing on how we interact as an individual within a team rather than like our mechanics or our game knowledge. So group cohesion is like probably the most important thing, and what that means is it's just how well a group really works together. That's really all it means. You shouldn't confuse this actually with like getting along with a group. When you go into solo queue, okay, if you do make a new friend, that's cute, but it's not why you go in there. Very few people going like, I want to meet some new friends and talk about like my personal life. Let's go into solo queue. That's just bad. Let's just not even do that. Rather more, you're there to win, you're there to climb the elo, but you got to work with this group. You got to be polite with them a little bit, you got to kind of see how everybody is, and you got to coordinate it. And there's two key things that you can do within the game in order to help this process, which will actually relate to the stages of group forming, which I just discussed, which would be communicating in-game plans is the first one, and the second one is communicating in a positive tone. So let's look at communicating in-game plans. Say you're a jungler. One of the best ways you can spend your time in the jungle, besides farming, roaming, all that stuff, communicating with your team, checking with your lane, saying like, hey, can we gank this guy here? Or, hey, I'm thinking of coming up top, saying, can you let the lane push in so he overextends? Kind of like things like that, and like planning it out. And like, this is where you can use really basic stuff. You could just ping, like on my way, or you could say, hey, doing level 2 gank mid. If you want to do some like really unique strategies within the game, or you have this idea, communicating what you want to do with your team and letting them in on the little secret will help them prepare for it, and it's going to improve your coordination. And with that, your execution of your plan is going to improve, and it's going to be a beautiful thing, really. So after all, say you want to do a level 2 gank mid, like you're Jarvan, you just got bread buff, the enemy team his only escape is flash, then you could say, hey, I'm going to come mid right after I get level 2, and then your mid laner can prepare for that, and he can, like maybe let the guy bait in, or he can go really aggressive, trade really hard, get this guy lower, and make him burn a few pots, and then you guys can spring the trap on him. It will be a lot more effective than you just kind of like, not even mentioning that idea before. You decide on it, and then you ping on the way there, and then maybe he was playing passively, maybe just like, all right, I'm just going to let this guy push in, I'm not going to trade with him at all. Then you're trying to gank this full health guy who has no pressure on him. So, that's kind of like how your communication can affect your teammates playing and overall working towards that. This applies to like duo lane as well, saying like, hey, I like to be passive in lane, so don't be too aggressive because I'm not used to following you up, or being like, okay, man, dude, I want to play these balls to the wall. We got this really good lane matchup. Let's go ham in all the time. I think we're, and we'll win. Trust me on this one, okay? You could communicate those things. You could settle on the play style and the plan for what you're going to do later on. Again, talking with your jungler, letting them know like, hey, this guy's gankable. Hey, this guy doesn't have any summoner spells. They come back up at this time. You should visit this lane. Except, of course, probably not quite as eloquent or long-witted. More like mid-flash 11, 12, and so, okay, I have to level 12 to come gank the lane. Communicating like that is really good to building group cohesion because it's letting your team know what's going on, what they have to keep in mind still, as well as saying, hey, this guy, he wants to play like a team player. The second thing that we can look at for improving group cohesion within the dynamic, okay, is positive tone. This really isn't like a fancy term. It's more like just the idea of, hey, communicate positively. Now, I'm not saying like completely bullshit them, okay? If you're playing like this really early game power, mid game spike in composition, all right, and you just fed the fuck out of several like late game scaling, like a Nasus top lane has 3 kills, the Jinx is up 5 kills, this is a catastrophe of a game in all honesty, and you're like sitting there with like a Corky who like hasn't completed a Trinity Force at 20 minutes, like the game's over. You know, don't bullshit, like, don't worry guys, we still got this. Be a realist, but don't be a dick about either bad situations or just about communicating, really. So like, for example, say that your support like completely misses a skill shot, like it just goes really haywire. Instead of like flaming me like, what the fuck was that hook? You know, like what was that shit? Just be, you know, you just let it go. Just like don't even bring up like, all right, this guy's like weird. Because one thing you have to keep in mind when it comes to solo queue is that not everyone's gonna perform at their best. People do have bad games, or you know, something unexpected happens. You know, life is life. But the one thing that the one thing you can do which will worsen the situation is flaming someone or getting really mad at them, because then it adds additional pressure onto them, okay? Ranked is already kind of pressuring as it is for some people, just because like, oh man, I got LP on the line, I don't know if I can do this match, you know, I've never played this champion before. And then you kind of like putting pressure on them, being like, you need to hit your skill shots, man, or wow, you suck so bad. You know, it brings down the morale of the team, and it shows that, hey, you're not really looking positively ahead and figuring out how you can actually come back and win the game. You're more interested in looking at past mistakes, which you can't fix, you can't change anything about, berating someone who probably knows they fucked up. Let's be honest. If you die solo lane, it's just like, wow, I played that really bad. Okay, I feel really bad about myself. Wow, you're trash! Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. I'm just going to leave now. That's how it kind of goes, rather than instead of being like, okay, let him push the lane in, I'm going to try and come up top lane. Mid, can you push your lane in, come roam up top, we're going to 3-man this bitch. You know, and look how like the difference in handling like that situation where someone fed first blood. There's just being like, wow, you're bad, disregarding him, and then there's also something, okay, we're going to try and help you out, we're going to communicate this plan, this is how we're going to come back. You know, or being like, hey, just freeze your lane, I'm going to go like get this mid snowballing because he's winning. If you can just play passive, not die anymore, just keep on farming, we'll be fine, okay? You know, like there's different ways of communicating and looking ahead and proactively going ahead and trying to find a way to win. As well as also like the language that you use, you know, kind of being like, hey, good job, man, rather than like, great fucking job, guys, knew you assholes could do it. Which I don't think anyone would ever say it like that. But using language and swear words, there's a bit of a negative connotation to it. You know, there's a huge difference in the way that you can type it out. If, like, someone makes a mistake, you can go, you know, if you just, like, lol, that hook, you know, then suddenly it's something to laugh about and just like, yeah, that was a bad hook, man. But whereas if you're like, again, to use this example, what the fuck was that hook, man? Then there's this negative pressure that you're placing on the team, and that's hurting the group cohesion. Because now your teammates aren't going to want to work with you. They're probably going to be inclined to ignore you. So if you do suddenly have, like, this idea or you want to make a specific call, no one's going to hear you, even though you see maybe a really good opportunity. And overall, you know, people will be more interested in like showing you up rather than thinking about how they want to win their lane, go on to do their game, things like that. So that's like really what we have to consider in these cases for you, is looking to communicate your in-game plan and proactively look for ways to win, as well as doing so in a positive manner as to not, you know, agitate teammates, just because we don't know how they're going to respond. You know, there are some people where if you tell them, like, wow, what was that mistake, they'll just, you know, rage quit, and then you're playing 4v5, and then, okay, good luck. You just shot yourself in the foot by agitating someone who, you know, they just want to get on, they want to have fun, and then they're being berated for messing up. So that's a very, I feel like, scatterbrained discussion about the whole matter. But to kind of bring it on in and to narrow it down again, look for what you have to do to win the game, communicate the ideas that you have to have, as well as, you know, be positive about how you're speaking, but don't just flat out lie or bullshit, but also don't be like an overly harsh critic about it. There's a good way of giving some feedback, and then there's just going way too harsh with unnecessary criticism. There's a balance between the two. So that's like a very brief introduction to like just this fragment of group dynamics within League of Legends. And in all honesty, there's like the entire field we can apply to League of Legends, just because League of Legends is a team game, and it's basic, and it fundamentally operates on how we as players operate within a group. And when you look at some other things, you know, we are basically participating in this huge group dynamic study where, you know, people can look and observe how anonymous people come together and collaborate in order to succeed in defeating competition. That's a really kind of fun way of thinking about League of Legends, in all honesty. So, anyways, guys, lecture's winding down. I think the cafeteria is open for all of y'all. I forgot my watch today, but that's fine. Thank you guys for listening to the lecture. Please read my published paper, which will be on GoPretend.com. Give us some readback. I'll be expecting the quiz next week from you guys, over reviewing what we talked about. Expect Tuckman on it. Expect a positive tone on it. Anyways, thank you all for coming today. This is Sita Mangaka, signing out.